Homeless boy heals paralyzed millionaire who mocked him. What he asks for stuns everyone. The morning air hung thick with dew as Thomas Weller positioned his wheelchair beneath the sprawling oak that had become his daily sanctuary of bitterness. The custom Italian leather of his chair gleamed in sharp contrast to the weathered bark behind him, just as his tailored navy suit and gold Rolex seemed to mock the hollow man they adorned. 3 years had passed since the accident had stolen his legs, but it was the pity in people's eyes that had truly crippled him. He sat there, jaw clenched, watching the world move past him with a freedom he'd never taste again. The scent of fresh grass and blooming jasmine only deepened his resentment. Even nature seemed to taunt him with its endless renewal while he remained trapped in stillness. That's when he noticed the boy. Small and motionless, the child stood perhaps 20 feet away, studying him with an intensity that made Thomas's skin crawl. The boy couldn't have been older than 7, his clothes telling the story of poverty that Thomas had spent his life climbing away from. His t-shirt, once white, had faded to the color of old bones, tucked into green pants that bore more patches than original fabric. A small gray pouch hung from his thin waist, and his arms were folded across his narrow chest with surprising authority. But it was his eyes that unnerved Thomas most. Dark, unwavering, holding not fear or need, but something that looked disturbingly like certainty. The staring contest stretched between them until Thomas's patience snapped like a dry twig. "What?" he barked, his voice cutting through the morning stillness. "Need something, kid? There's a soup kitchen downtown." The boy didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward with deliberate slowness, his bare feet making soft whispers against the gravel path. When he spoke, his voice carried a quietness that somehow demanded attention. "You're angry because you think no one can fix you, but it can if you feed me first." Thomas blinked, then threw his head back and released a laugh so harsh it startled a couple walking their dog across the path. The sound bounced off the trees like a slap. "Oh, this is rich," he wheezed, wiping his eyes. "Let me guess, you've got miracle hands." He glanced around theatrically. "Hidden cameras somewhere? What are you? One of those TikTok faith healer kids?" "I'm hungry," the boy said with maddening simplicity. "But if you feed me, I'll heal you." "Oh, will you now?" Thomas rolled forward an inch, still chuckling. "So that's the deal. I toss you a sandwich and you do some holy mumbo-jumbo and poof, my legs come back." The boy's expression never shifted, his stillness more unsettling than any tantrum would have been. Thomas's amusement curdled into something darker. "Tell you what," he said, gesturing grandly with arms that had grown powerful from him. Most wasn't the boy's obvious poverty. It was his impossible calm, as if Thomas's mockery was just weather passing through. "Do you think you're the only one who suffered?" Micah said, his voice soft as morning mist. "I've been hungry for 3 days. My mother died on a floor cold and forgotten. I don't have shoes because I gave them to someone else who needed them more." The words hit Thomas like small stones, each one finding its mark. He blinked, his smirk wavering. "But I don't need your money," Micah continued. "I just need you to believe." Thomas's mouth twisted into familiar cynicism. "Oh, so now it's a faith thing. Here we go." "I don't need you to believe in me," the boy corrected with gentle firmness. "Just believe there's still something good left, even in you." The air between them seemed to thicken like storm clouds gathering. Somewhere above, a squirrel scrambled across oak branches, sending leaves rustling in the soft wind, but the tension remained taut as a wire. Thomas leaned forward in his chair, close enough to see his own bitter reflection in the boy's dark eyes. "You come here in rags, preach to me about hope, and promise the impossible. You don't know what it's like to lose everything." Micah shook his head slowly. "You didn't lose everything, you're still alive." The words were simple, matter of fact, but they pierced Thomas deeper than any surgeon's blade ever had. His carefully constructed armor of rage cracked for just a moment before he welded it back together. "I've had enough," he said harshly, the words scraping his throat raw. "Go play savior somewhere else." Micah didn't move. Instead, he reached into his small gray pouch and withdrew. Nothing. His hand emerged empty, palm up, extended as if offering invisible treasure. The gesture was so absurd, so utterly ridiculous, that Thomas burst into one final mocking laugh. "You think that is going to work?" Then Micah stepped forward and placed his small, dust-covered hand on Thomas's knee. The laughter died in Thomas's throat like a candle snuffed out. His hand, which moments before had gripped his wheelchair's armrest in cruel amusement, now trembled uncontrollably. He stared down at the impossible sight, this child's fingers resting gently on his useless, lifeless knee, the knee that hadn't responded to anything in over 3 years. But now it was tingling. At first, Thomas thought it was some kind of psychosomatic response, his mind playing desperate tricks. But the sensation grew stronger, undeniable. Warmth spread up from his calf into his thigh like electrical current flowing where there had been only dead silence. It was the feeling of life returning to the tomb of his body. He jolted backward, breath catching in his throat. What? What did you do?" Micah didn't answer immediately. He simply looked up at him with those steady, knowing eyes, not with pride or arrogance, just quiet, unwavering belief that seemed to reach into Thomas's chest and squeeze his heart. Thomas's pulse hammered against his ribs. He reached down with shaking hands and gripped his knee hard, his fingers digging into muscle that should have been numb. This isn't real," he stammered. But even as he spoke, he could feel something alive, something moving, something that had been dead for so long he'd forgotten what sensation felt like. Micah slowly pulled his hand away, the warmth lingering like an echo. "It's not me," he said softly. "It's him." Thomas stared at the boy as if he were looking at a ghost, or perhaps an angel. "Him? The one you stopped believing in." Thomas shook his head violently, denial pouring from him like blood from a wound. This is a trick. There's no way. No way this is real." His voice cracked, betraying the terror and shame building inside his chest like floodwater. Micah didn't argue. He simply stepped back, arms folding across his thin chest in that same authoritative posture. "You asked for healing, but you don't want to be whole. You want control. You want answers without surrender." Thomas's lips parted, but no words came. His entire worldview was crumbling beneath him like rotten floorboards. Micah continued, his voice carrying the weight of uncomfortable truth. "Do you know why no doctor could help you? Why your millions couldn't fix you? Because this wasn't about your legs." Thomas's eyes burned with unshed tears he hadn't allowed himself in years. "Then what was it about?" Micah took a breath, and Thomas could see something ancient and sad flicker in the child's expression. "You used to crush people to get ahead. Your assistant, Jordan, fired when his son was in the hospital. Your friend Marcus left bankrupt after you backed out of the deal. You even told your wife to leave because her grief made you feel weak." The words hit Thomas like physical blows. His throat tightened until he could barely breathe. How could this ragged child possibly know these things, these secrets he'd buried deep in the vault of his conscience? "I've done what I had to," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. "No," Micah replied, his voice gentle but implacable. "You did what your pride told you to." There was no anger in the boy's tone, only truth delivered with surgical precision. And somehow that made it infinitely worse than any accusation. Thomas's voice came out ragged, broken. "So what now? You've made your point." Micah looked at him one last time with those eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Feed someone hungry. Forgive someone you hurt. Give not because it helps you sleep, but because it brings others peace. Then maybe your legs won't be the only thing that comes back." He turned to leave, his bare feet making no sound on the gravel. "Wait," Thomas cried, wheeling forward desperately. "I have money, cars, houses. Please take anything." Micah stopped, but didn't turn around. "I told you I don't need your money. Someone else does." And just like that, he walked away. No fanfare, no miracle music, just a small boy disappearing down the tree-lined path as quietly as he had come, leaving behind only the lingering warmth in Thomas's knee and the wreckage of everything he thought he knew. Thomas sat in stunned silence, his fingers trembling on his wheelchair's controls. The morning air felt different now, charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. Then, with a deep breath that felt like the first real breath he'd taken in years, he placed his hands on the armrests and pushed himself up. Slowly, shakily, his legs responded. For the first time in 3 years, Thomas Weller stood on his own 2 feet, and he wept like a child. 1 week later, morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Micah's Table, a nonprofit center that served hot meals to the homeless, funded entirely by Thomas's liquidated assets. The billionaire was no longer dressed in his armor of expensive suits. He wore a simple shirt with sleeves rolled up, his hands busy serving food to a line of waiting children and adults who had nowhere else to go. He didn't speak much, but he made sure to ask every person their name before placing a warm plate in their hands. And each time he felt the solid ground beneath his feet, each time he took a step on legs that worked again, he remembered the boy who had nothing but gave him everything: faith, hope, redemption, and something money could never buy: a second chance. The warmth that had started in his knee that day had spread throughout his entire body, but more importantly, it had reached his heart. Thomas Weller had finally learned the difference between being healed and being whole.